To create your surface, we could do it a couple of ways, and I'm not sure what to expect at contests necessarily. So I just kind of sketched this one out. What they did tell me is that we would have elevations at the property corners, at least for the contest here in the El Paso region. At state, they probably wouldn't even give you, honestly, elevations at all. They would just tell you to make up a topo. At state competition, that's very unrealistic because you do need to be given that information. You can't make it up. But if you ever had to, you can make it up and just make it up with a number that kind of makes sense. Here in the El Paso region, we're at the about 3,600 or 3,700 feet above sea level. In the San Antonio area, in my experience, has been 500 feet above sea level. So it just really depends. So yeah, at contests, since most of the judges do come from the lower region of Texas, those guys are used to elevations of 500 or 600 feet above sea level, not the 3,600 that we're used to here in El Paso. So this example is just to show you how to use these elevations that were given to me. We could probably expect that here at the regional competition. So how could we do that? Since we do have the reference of the property lines, I lost my little cursor, so I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, so something happened with this drawing. There we go. Okay, that's kind of weird. So I did that and I kind of fixed it. Worst case, I could have just closed Civil 3D and opened it again. Okay, so a couple of ways that we can do this. We can create feature lines from objects, which the objects would be the property line. I could just select them and create into feature lines. Or the other thing you can do, and if you were to do that, remember that if you were to do that, then you would have to come back and edit the feature line elevations using the feature line elevation editor, or you can draw feature lines. So for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and draw feature lines. Um, I use current layer. I do suggest creating your own layer. In this case, we can just call it 3D feature line and just use that same current layer. There's really nothing else to change. Hit OK. And then I would just start at a certain point there. Now the elevation there, again, just going to my handout, you just use this for reference. You should have a handout with numbers for your particular application. So this will be 3685.54. Enter, and I go to this point here, and then that one we just continue by just using the elevations. And right now it's actually asking for specify grade, so we need to specifically change it over to elevation. So at that point, I'm going to specify the elevation will be 37, in this case, 3715.99. So just be careful with that because it would have put a grade of 3,715%, which would have put a really high elevation. So be careful. So we just need to specify elevations. And in this case, I'm going to go over here. It's defaulting to specify elevation, so we'll keep it at that, 3709.49. We're going to go to this one and it should default to still the elevation. This one's 3699.98. And then we go to this elevation, that point there, that elevation is 3697.54. And then we go to this corner here, 3692.88. And I think we have a corner here somewhere right in there. And that one was not given an elevation to us. So they only give us this one here and here. So, I might have just drawn the feature line all the way to here. That's probably what I should have had to do because we don't have one there. So, I'll leave that one alone for now. I think I'm just going to undo, go back. So it just goes back to there and then just go straight over here. Because again, I don't really have an elevation there. So I'm just going to go to there and it closed it. And it looks like it should have picked up the elevation there. Don't forget that you always want to check in 3D just to make sure that we don't have anything kind of crazy with that surface and everything looks to be all in roughly the same area. Of course, it's there is going to be some difference in elevation because we're going from 97 to 92 to 85, but at least remember that you don't want to see anything going down to the zero elevation. That's just a big thing that you got to be careful with. So this one so far is making sense and everything's looking good. If you were to have converted the feature lines, don't forget that you can select the feature lines and you can go edit elevation editor, and then you can go in there and adjust the elevations and change them to whatever you need. How do you know which one is which? You can select the station, and the station will give you like a little marker, That little marker is telling you which station that is. And then that way you'll know which elevation you would apply to whatever point is on the handout or whatever is given to you. Once again, some cases you might have to make this stuff up. That's very unrealistic, but sometimes you have to do that. Okay, so there's really nothing to adjust here. So what I'm going to do is make sure you're under the prospector, and if the tool space is gone, don't forget that you can click on this button to bring back the tool space. Make sure you're in prospector. Surfaces, I'm going to make a new one. More than likely, this is going to be an existing ground surface. So I'm just going to go over here and call it existing ground, or EG is usually the best two letters to use. And as far as the style, we do have different styles that we can pick from. If you did if you did the default drawings, you should have a background and design. The design is usually meant for proposed ground. The background is usually existing ground, and 1 in 5 is a very common interval. So we'll go ahead and use that style. It kind of defaulted there. And we'll go back and adjust it here in a little bit and hit OK. So there's our surface, and then we're going to come back and define the surface. These feature lines should be able to be defined as break lines. So you're going to add the description. I'll just call them feature lines. Again, it doesn't really matter. Feature lines. And then there's really nothing else to change. Just hit OK. Select the feature lines themselves. If you need to select several of them, go ahead and hit OK. And there we go. Okay. So that looks pretty good. I don't think there's much else that we can do. The thing that I do want to do in this case is I want to make this look like existing ground. I have an example of a topo that's an industry standard topo that's done by a surveyor here in El Paso. And you notice existing ground is typical hidden lines. And the other thing too is depending on how much time we have, might not be a bad idea to create a pen style to shade, because most of the time, whatever is existing, whether it's existing contours, existing curb, existing driveways and stuff, those are usually shaded. So it just depends on how much time we have. So here, I'm going to go back to the surface style, surface properties. I'm going to edit the surface style. The surface style is the 1 in 5 contours. So I can tell you right now that the edges, I'm going to go to display. The edges that border, we usually don't display that. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. Okay, because we usually don't display those edges. And then the major and minor contours are by layer here. And it says topo major, C topo major, C topo minor. Um, we just need to pay attention to what color that is. Right now it says by layer, so we would actually have to go to the layers and look at the C topo major and C topo minor to see what colors those are, in case we're able to get to the pen styles. C topo major and minor, and that's 9 and 8. Okay. The other thing is, I mentioned you really would want to make them hidden, so we can go ahead and do that now. Hidden, and then here hidden. And don't forget that we can also do it from the, so it's done by layer. There it is. The reason it's so small is because, unfortunately, line types in Civil 3D, even though in model space, I always recommend to put it at the layer, at the scale you're using. The paper space, we already set a 24 by 36 rectangle, just a little rectangle here with a name and date. And this one's already set to the scale 1 to 50. But you notice that you can actually see the line types here, but you cannot see them on model space. That's kind of weird. A setting that you need to be aware of in case you wanted to change it, because once again, in model space, even though it's 1 to 50, you don't see the line types. A setting is called MSLT scale. MSLT scale is for some reason or another set a default of 0. If you change that to 1, then you will, and regenerate your screen, you will see your line types. I'm not sure why that's the case, but that is the case in Civil 3D, to be able to see the line types to match from model space to paper space. Even though the scales match, for some reason or another, those line types just don't show up. So that's what I would do to create the surface style, adjust the surface style just to make it look more like a industry standard surface style. Don't forget that the other thing too that I would do too is to add some labels, and I would probably do contour multiple at interval, and that's the one where you pick from one side all the way to the other, and it'll label the contours. Right now, it's going to be from that line, and then along interval, from that line it would label it every 100 feet. 100 feet would be too many. I'm gonna probably guess maybe every 500 feet from that point. So label this one, and then 500 feet away would label another one. It's a pretty small plat, so it didn't get to label any more, but that might work. If you wanted to put a few more, you can go back and um, just redo the labeling. Contour multiple interval. Maybe I can go this way here, and then maybe every 250 feet or something. So you'll see a few more labels if you wanted to. Just depends on how you want that to look like. Don't forget that we also need to adjust the style. So you would go to the surface styles as far as the labels, surface styles, and then actually it will be the label of the surface. Sorry, that's the contour, the one that we just used right now. The surface style. I'm gonna go and see surface style we're using existing majors and minors. So those are the ones that we'd have to go and adjust. Edit that one because right now it's showing us with two decimal places. So we'd have to select this guy, and because you want to take that off, you usually don't show the two decimal places. Select the surface style, delete the little code, change that to be to the nearest one, reinsert the code, hit OK, and apply. That way we can just show it with no decimal places. Of course, that was the major. I guess we have to go to the minor, do the same thing, edit that surface style. Go in here. Don't forget to select the little code, delete the code, change that to the nearest one, and reinsert the code. Okay. So that's pretty much what I would do for that surface style. This little line here um, shouldn't plot, but if it bugs you, I would get rid of it. If you go to properties, right now it's showing true for the, let me see what setting that would be. Display contour label line. I'm going to change that to false because we really don't need to see it. It's still there if I select it, so you can move it around if you needed to. But for the most part, you just select it and just make that false. And I think that should be enough to create a surface style.